You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
A young woman full of life disappears into thin air. A confessed killer walks free. And more than 5 decades later, a grieving family still asks the same question. What happened to Lucille Butterworth? Lucille's story begins in Hobart, Tasmania. A young model and television station employee, she was radiant, grounded, and well-loved by everyone who met her. She had a boyfriend, John Fitzgerald, and a bright future ahead. But on the night of August 25th, 1969, she vanished. She was on her way to New Norfolk to visit John after attending a Miss Tasmania fundraiser. Her father didn't want her driving alone up a dark country road, so she took the bus instead. Lucille was last seen at the Claremont bus stop. Witnesses say the bus was running late, a car pulled up, she accepted a ride, and that was the last time anyone saw her alive. Her disappearance was reported almost immediately. But in the critical early days, police did almost nothing. Their assumption, she'd run away. But her family knew better. Lucille hadn't packed more than a night's change of clothes. She had a stable job, a committed relationship, and no reason to vanish. Then came the dream. Lucille's father woke up in the middle of the night, choking. He said a white light and a red glow came through the window. He told his family, Lucille has been murdered. The family was shaken, but police still did not act. When they finally started looking, their focus zeroed in on one man, John Gannon Lonergan, a former police officer turned taxi driver with a record of sexually assaulting women at bus stops. Investigators were convinced, especially Inspector Orb Canning, who became obsessed with Lonergan as the sole suspect. He refused to consider anyone else. But there was a problem. Lonergan couldn't be placed near the Claremont bus stop on the night Lucille disappeared. There was no evidence, just a gut feeling and tunnel vision that stalled the case. Her family suffered through decades of uncertainty. Her mother refused to leave the house, waiting for Lucille to come walking back up the driveway. Her father died of a broken heart. Decades passed with no progress. Then in 2010, a new detective entered the scene, David Plumpton. He wasn't even assigned the case. He just cared. He read the old files, met Lucille's surviving brothers, and made it personal. In the file, he found something unusual, the name Jeffrey Charles Hunt. This was a name buried in the records, barely followed up. But Hunt had a history, a dark one. In 1976, he murdered a young car saleswoman named Susan Knight. He lured her out to a remote location, raped her, and beat her to death with a rock. Her body was dumped under logs and stones. He confessed easily, calmly, during the police interview, just like that. The detective on the Knight case was Barry Dillon. And Dillon, who had also worked the Butterworth investigation years earlier, asked Hunt if he knew anything about Lucille. What came next was stunning. Hunt said yes. He told detectives he'd picked Lucille up at the bus stop. They knew each other, he said. She accepted a lift, but on the road to New Norfolk, something came over him. He tried to kiss her. She resisted, so he grabbed her and strangled her. When she stopped struggling, he carried her body out of the car and dumped it by the Derwent River. He confessed in detail, but that confession never saw the light of day. Inspector Orb Canning, the same man who had clung to Lonergan for decades, was called in to review it. He entered the interview room. When he came out, he told the team, "You've got it wrong. He's not confessing to Butterworth." Dillon, confused, went back in to ask Hunt again. Hunt repeated the same confession. But Canning wasn't having it. He went back in himself. When he came out, he said Hunt was unable to assist. He told detectives to log the interview that way, and just like that, the confession disappeared. No charges, no follow-up, nothing. And it stayed buried for almost 40 years. The only record from that day was a single line in an interview register that Hunt had been spoken to and was unable to assist. No mention of a full-blown confession, no transcript, no follow-up, but word spread, quietly. Within Tasmania Police, it became an open secret. Hunt had confessed, multiple detectives heard it, and still nothing happened. Until Detective David Plumpton started asking questions. Plumpton tracked down the original detectives, Dillon and Orr, who both confirmed the confession was real. And not just real, detailed. Lucille, the bus stop, the route, the struggle, the strangulation, the dumping of her body near the river. So Plumpton reopened the case. He began rebuilding the timeline. Lucille's destination was New Norfolk. Her boyfriend, John Fitzgerald, lived there. He and his father ran a general store on Station Street. Lucille stayed there often. Just down the road lived Bill and Mavis Hunt, and their 6 children, 5 of whom, including Jeffrey, were albinos. In a small country town, they stood out. Everyone knew who they were. Jeffrey Charles Hunt worked in the Fitzgerald store. He stocked shelves, drove the delivery van, ran errands, but when police questioned him years later, he denied everything. He claimed he didn't know Lucille, never worked at the shop, never saw her. Witnesses disagreed. One even remembered seeing Hunt watching Lucille sunbake in the backyard. She was uncomfortable enough to go inside and tell John, "That man, Whitey, was staring at me." John told her not to call him that. He didn't like it. This mattered to police. It meant Lucille had reason to trust Hunt. If he offered her a ride at the bus stop, she would have accepted. It also turned out that Hunt had been accused of molesting a girl when he was 16. The incident took place at a train station in New Norfolk. The accusation was well known in town, but nothing came of it. Some say his father's connections helped make it disappear. Plumpton and his team shifted focus to Claremont, the site of the bus stop. They needed to prove that Hunt had access to a vehicle, was driving it the night Lucille disappeared, and had the opportunity to pick her up. Detective Kerry Milhouse took the lead. He tracked down new evidence, pulling details from old reports, interviews, and dusty files. It became clear that Hunt was driving the family Holden sedan in 1969. His father didn't drive. He was the only one behind the wheel. A witness across the street from the bus stop recalled seeing a beat-up old Holden stop at the curb. A woman who fit Lucille's description got in. The car drove off. After that, no one saw her again. Police now had a working theory. Hunt, driving home from work, saw Lucille waiting. He offered her a lift. She accepted. On a quiet stretch of road outside town, he stopped the car. He tried to kiss her. She resisted. He strangled her. Then, he carried her body toward the river and dumped it. But they needed more than theory. So in 2014, Tasmania Police brought Hunt in for formal questioning. 45 years after Lucille vanished, Jeffrey Charles Hunt sat across from Detectives Plumpton and Milhouse at the Devonport Police Station. The interview lasted 4 hours, and it was a mess. Hunt lied, denied knowing Lucille, claimed he didn't drive until 1971, 2 years after the disappearance, said he took the bus. But the police had proof he got his driver's license in April 1969. They even tracked down the officer who administered the test, a man who had retired in 1967. Caught in a lie, Hunt backtracked, tried to cover, but his story kept shifting. They showed him photos of the family car, a white-roofed Holden sedan, similar to the one seen at the bus stop. He admitted the car looked familiar, but insisted it wasn't his. The pressure mounted. Police had multiple witnesses placing Hunt near the bus stop that night. They had documents proving he was driving. They had prior accusations of abuse. They had circumstantial evidence, but they didn't have a confession. And that mattered. In the end, Hunt walked out of the police station a free man. With no confession and no body, the police went back to basics. They launched a search near the area Hunt described back in 1976, the spot where he said he dumped Lucille's body. The dig site was off a rural road near the Derwent River, overgrown, isolated, muddy. Forensics teams, police dogs, cadaver experts, and geophysicists with ground-penetrating equipment all combed the area. They found bones, lots of them. But every one turned out to be animal remains. There was no sign of Lucille. Detectives were crushed. They had believed Hunt's original confession that he carried Lucille's body from the car across wet terrain and left her there. But with no physical evidence, their strongest hope now lay with testimony. That's when the prison confessions started coming in. An inmate from Risdon Prison reached out to Detective Plumpton. He said Hunt had confessed to him while they were locked up together. Not just in passing, in detail. He described the night, the location. With no confession and no body, the police went back to basics. They launched a search near the area Hunt described back in 1976, the spot where he said he dumped Lucille's body. The dig site was off a rural road near the Derwent River, overgrown, isolated, muddy. Forensics teams, police dogs, cadaver experts, and geophysicists with ground-penetrating equipment all combed the area. They found bones. Lots of them. But everyone turned out to be animal remains. There was no sign of Lucille. Detectives were crushed. They had believed Hunt's original confession that he carried Lucille's body from the car across wet terrain and left her there. But with no physical evidence, their strongest hope now lay with testimony. That's when the prison confessions started coming in. An inmate from Risdon Prison reached out to Detective Plumpton. He said Hunt had confessed to him while they were locked up together, not just in passing, in detail. He described the night, the location, the killing, the muddy ground, the moment he gave up dragging the body. Then 2 more inmates came forward. Each claimed Hunt had told them the same story. They didn't know each other, but their accounts matched. All of them said Hunt had talked openly about Lucille, that he'd strangled her, that he left her in a muddy spot near the river, that he'd never be charged because there was no body. One inmate, Philip Roger Harris, shared the story with crime reporter Adam Shand. According to Harris, Hunt had pink eyes that rolled around in his head, and he remembered Hunt saying, quote, "They'll never get me. They haven't found the body." It wasn't just bravado. Hunt reportedly admitted that he stopped the car after Lucille panicked, reached over, and strangled her. Then he got out, pulled her body through mud so deep it soaked his boots, and left her there. But these were prison confessions, tricky to use in court. So the next move was to go public. The Tasmanian Coroner's Court scheduled an official inquest into Lucille Butterworth's disappearance. Hunt was subpoenaed to appear. For the first time in decades, he had to answer questions under oath. Lucille's surviving family members sat in court, her brother Jim, her former fiancé John Fitzgerald. The courtroom was heavy with tension. Hunt lied, over and over. He denied knowing Lucille, denied working at the Fitzgerald store, denied ever picking her up. Even as photos were shown, even as witness statements were read aloud, even as forensic evidence tied him to the location, he remembered the make and model of the family Holden in detail, even cited the cylinder that didn't fire properly. But when shown a photo of Lucille, he said, "I don't know that lady." Inmates testified. One described Hunt saying, "You cut them open, stick a brick in them, and dump them in the river." Another recalled Hunt saying he loved Lucille and would kill again. The courtroom was stunned. John Fitzgerald, Lucille's former fiancé, broke down in tears and had to be wheeled out. Decades of grief poured out in one moment. Still, the inquest had a job to do. Establish facts, connect the evidence, make a formal finding. And the coroner, Simon Cooper, did exactly that. After less than 10 minutes of deliberation, he issued his official ruling. Lucille Butterworth was murdered by Jeffrey Charles Hunt in 1969. The finding accepted Hunt's original 1976 confession as fact, that he picked her up, that he strangled her, that he disposed of her body near the riverbank, that she never made it to New Norfolk. Finally, after nearly 50 years, the Butterworth family had confirmation. A name, a killer, an official ruling, but not justice, because coroner findings don't equal criminal charges. That decision was left to Tasmania's Director of Public Prosecutions. The Butterworth family waited, hoping the coroner's ruling would trigger a criminal trial. They were wrong. Tasmania's Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP, called them in for a meeting. Jim Butterworth was there. So was John. They were hopeful. They expected charges. Instead, the DPP told them there would be no prosecution, no trial. The reason? According to the DPP, there was no reasonable prospect of conviction. The evidence, though extensive, was circumstantial. The confession from 1976 was never formally recorded. The prison testimonies were considered weak, and without a body, the case just didn't meet the threshold for trial. Lucille's family was stunned. Jim Butterworth said he'd lost faith in the legal system. He said, "We told them what happened. He confessed. He lied repeatedly, and they still won't act." Detective David Plumpton, who had dedicated years of his life to reviving the case, was also gutted. In his words, "I can categorically prove Hunt is a liar, but I cannot prove him to be a murderer." It wasn't just a technicality, it was a legal dead end. So Hunt walked free. He still lives in Tasmania. For legal reasons, his current town can't be named. But by all accounts, he's alone, unwanted, avoided. His name and the shadow around it follow him wherever he goes. Adam Shand, the investigative journalist who had followed the case for years, decided to track Hunt down, just to see him, to understand what kind of life he was leading. He found Hunt's house, saw the sheets pulled tight across the windows, curtains that twitched when someone approached, a house hiding from the world. Jim Butterworth also drove past that house. He snapped photos. looked through the windows just to see if the man who stole his sister's life would show his face. He didn't. Jim said he didn't go there to confront him, just to look. But when asked what he would have done if Hunt had come outside, his answer was silence. And then, what would you do? The heartbreak hasn't faded. If anything, it's sharpened with time. The family still walks past the Claremont bus stop, now marked by a memorial plaque. Another memorial stands near the riverbank where Lucille's remains were likely dumped. Her parents' ashes were scattered in a rose garden nearby, just across the road from the spot where their daughter vanished. Her brothers are aging. Jim Butterworth has terminal cancer, 6 to 15 months to live, according to doctors. He knows the clock is ticking. The case is officially closed. There's no active investigation, no charges, no prison time, just memories, frustration, grief. Detectives like Plumpton and Dillon say it plainly. If not for the original lead investigator, Orb Canning, the case might have been solved back in 1976. The confession might have been recorded. Hunt might have gone to trial. Instead, a man who admitted to murder, in detail, is free. Lucille Butterworth is dead. Her killer is alive, and the law can't or won't do anything about it. Lucille Butterworth's disappearance is one of the most blatant failures in Australian criminal justice history. The facts were there. The confession was made. Multiple witnesses, including detectives and inmates, all heard Hunt describe how he murdered her. The circumstances matched. The timeline held. The vehicle lined up. The motive was clear. But because of a single decision made in a back room in 1976, all of it unraveled. That decision, made by Inspector Orb Canning, erased a confession, buried it, and protected a killer. The fallout has lasted generations. The Butterworth family lost Lucille. Then they lost their parents. Then they lost any real faith in the police, the courts, and the system that was supposed to protect them. What they've been left with is grief and silence. Detective Barry Dillon still walks past that bus stop every day with his dog. Every time he remembers what could have been. He still talks about it with fellow officers, still runs through the what-ifs, still blames Canning, still wonders how one man's refusal to believe could cause this much damage. Because here's the truth. Lucille Butterworth trusted someone she knew. She got in the car not with a stranger, but with a neighbor. A man who watched her from over the fence. A man who denied knowing her. A man who had already taken one woman's life. A man who admitted to both crimes and faced consequences for only one. Tasmanian police now say the case is closed. No active investigation, no movement, no justice. But Lucille's story is not just about one crime. It's about a system that refused to listen, refused to act, and ultimately refused to deliver justice, even when the truth was handed to them on a silver platter. And the truth is clear. Lucille Butterworth didn't run away. She didn't vanish. She was murdered by Jeffrey Charles Hunt. Everyone knows it. And still, he walks free.